In this video, we're going to cover a couple of things. We're going to cover how to create your assessment in Power DMS, and then also start to speak about adding assignments to the assessment in Power DMS. If you ever have any questions or need assistance with that, please reach out to Power DMS support. You may also want to reach out to your regional program manager for guidance and assistance. I'm going to navigate away from this PowerPoint and go to my Power DMS site. You may notice through videos, through your own site, through other people's sites, what you see within a Power DMS site is going to be dependent on the Power DMS features that your organization has purchased, as well as maybe permissions, your individual user permissions. So I just mentioned that in case your site might look ever so slightly different than this. Before we start to create the assessment, though, I'm going to navigate away from Power DMS and go to the CALEA website. So up here at the top, I have more than one tab open in preparation for this instruction. I've already opened up the CALEA.org website. Once you're here, if you'll go to the menu in the upper right-hand corner and expand that, under Education and then Tools and Tutorials, there's several resources here. I'm going to encourage you to reference the CALEA best practices for continued compliance. I've clicked on it. I already have it open right here. It's going to give some good guidance on things such as how to name your assessment, how to label your attachments, things that we'll talk about in other videos too. But as far as generating and creating that assessment initially, it's important that each assessment as you go through each cycle has a unique name. And so we normally recommend, you can abbreviate, this is totally up to you, just some examples. CALEA law enforcement, you might abbreviate that to LE. If it's advanced, if it's LE 1, training academy communications, campus security, the month and the year that you start that assessment through the month and the year that your site-based is planned for or scheduled for, you can edit the naming of your assessment. So if it's your initial assessment and you're not sure when that site-based assessment might be yet, maybe you just put in the month and the year of your enrollment. Just visually, you have that indicator. So I'm going to come back to Power DMS. You can create your assessment two ways. The first way is by hovering over New and going to Assessment. Another way is I can navigate specifically to the standards manual that I want to create my assessment over or from. If in this example, I'm clicking on Law Enforcement Standards Manual, and I can use the Create Assessment button up in the upper right-hand corner. You do have to have edit permissions of any standard manual that you want to generate an assessment from. So either here or new an assessment here. Either way, it's going to get you to the same location. If I'm hovering over new and choosing assessment, it's going to ask me what manual do I want to create it from. Just for the purposes of this assessment, I'm going to create mine off of law enforcement standards. If I had already selected the manual, it would know that I'm creating that from the law enforcement manual. So I'm going to start here. Give it just a minute to think about it. As again, the assessment name, the guidance, I just copied and pasted this from the best practices. A lot of times I like to abbreviate, so it might be CALEA LE. If you're advanced or tier 1, the month, the year that you're starting your assessment. I'm going to just do mine because I'm generating this video in March of 2024. If you suspect this is going to be a 4-year process, I've got 24, 25, 26, 27. Or if you're an initial assessment, you can leave it as of this, and you can always enter in your site-based date at a later time. I would recommend that you put a start date in here, and I like to recommend that you put a due date in here. Totally up to you. But if you utilize things and other features of the tool in the future, such as reoccurring tasks, things like that. A due date can be helpful. That's going to be the date that those reoccurrences will stop. So let's just put, because maybe I don't know exactly what my ending date is as of yet. So I can just put a date in there and I can edit that in the future. So I'm going to select essentially 24, 25, 26, all of 27, and we're going to just say for the purposes of generating this assessment, for examples, I'm going to put in early 2028. When I create an assessment from a standards manual, it's going to default to the most current version of that manual. It's not very frequently that you would ever want to generate your assessment off of an older version, but it gives you that option. And when you're creating your assessment, if you are the accreditation manager and you are generating this assessment, I would recommend that you go ahead and select your role of accreditation manager right here. By doing this, it's going to automatically assign you as a participant in this role once this assessment is created. If you were generating this assessment for the accreditation manager and you did not want to be assigned to the assessment, you could leave that blank. It's not required. But then I'm going to select save. And then I'm going to click view assessment in the upper right hand corner. And my assessment is created, really just that simple and fast. I've created, I selected my manual. I selected the version. I titled it the way I want. If it defaulted right here to it, if I want to change that title or change the dates that I've put in there, I can click Manage Assessment in the upper right-hand corner. I can put my end date. I can change my beginning date, start date, due date, things here. I can do all of that. Eventually, when this assessment is over, you'll archive it, but for now I've got it here. I can toggle between the management side and within the assessment, the side that I'm going to be working on by clicking View Assessment. You won't typically have to provide anyone security to this assessment. We're not going to talk about the export in this video, but you won't typically have to provide security because when you make that assignment, then by default, Power DMS will give the right permissions of participation of or observing to the assessment. But with that said, if you had a manager or somebody who wanted to also have permissions to manage this assessment, maybe see the assessment but not be assigned to participate it within the assessment, you could edit the security. So by default, I created this assessment. It gave me edit permissions to it. If I had somebody else that was working alongside by side, more than one accreditation manager or team members that I wanted to have the same permissions of managing assignments, things like that, I would have to give them edit permissions to this assessment. You may have noticed that it popped into my inbox that I have 462 new standards by the creation of this assessment and by me being assigned to the assessment. So I go back to the assessment itself. I'm going to click on the assignment tab across the top. When I generated this or created this assessment, it assigned me to the role of accreditation manager. The first task it generates is the fact that it wants a status. So it wants a status for 462 standards. And so it's pushed those to-dos to my inbox. First things first right there. If you, as the accreditation manager, are the only person working in this assessment, if you're really just a one-man show, right now, this is the only assignment that you need to make. But if you have other people who are going to be assisting you with uploading attachments, highlighting, maybe you want to create some tasks in the future and you want those tasks to populate to their inbox as you create those or on the dates that you set them up as, then those folks would need to be assigned to participate in this assessment. up to you. You do not have to make assignments to yourself for all of the roles that are available to you. The roles over here are accreditation manager, accreditation team, auxiliary. I usually describe that as an extra role to use however you want. Eventually, we would encourage you to use the mock assessor role, that you would make those assignments to other people who are reviewing your files for compliance and preparation for your CALEA compliance services website assessment. And on site, there is the CALEA assessor role. Eventually, you'll provide permissions to the CALEA site-based assessor, and then the CALEA compliance services member role, abbreviated, we call that the CALEA CSM. But for working in this, again, if you have somebody else who's working side by side with you, and you want them to have the same permissions as you, then we need to assign them to this assessment. Right now, they might not even be able to see the assessment. So I'm going to click on the assignment. And if I had somebody who I said, hey, we work on this together, exact same permissions, then maybe I'm just going to assign them as an accreditation manager. So I'm going to assign Dan as my partner. He needs to be assigned to a role. If I want him to participate, add attachments, edit attachments, receive tasks in his inbox, then his responsibility needs to be participate, and I would select save. So that's now Dan and I are, both co-working in here. Real simple, going to work that way. I'm going to remove Dan just for a moment. The other thing you can do is you can essentially set up a hierarchy within your assessment. That it's only if you choose to do that. So if Dan is my traffic person and I want Dan to work on the traffic chapter, which is chapter 61, and I want Dan to see that chapter and only that chapter and just participate in that, I can set up a hierarchy. So I would do that by first going to chapter 61, because that's the only chapter I want Dan to be assigned to. So I select on chapter 61, then I click add new assignment. I'm going to type in Dan's name. Now, I want Dan maybe not to have the same permissions as me, but maybe he's going to be on the accreditation team. So again, I'm creating this hierarchy. I'm going to review and essentially approve Dan's work before I show it to the CALEA CSM. So he's going to participate as a team member for Chapter 61, and I'm going to save that. Dan can't see any of the work in the accreditation manager role right now unless I give him permission to see those attachments. And I do want Dan to see my attachments, but I don't want him to edit those. So I'm going to assign Dan again, this time to the role of accreditation manager, but I'm going to leave him in the observe responsibility and save. Might seem like a lot of assignments, but once we get this all set up, it's going to work really, really great for you. Now, if Dan adds an attachment in the role of accreditation team, and I want to review and approve those, I can't make any edits to those if I'm not also assigned to the accreditation team role. So let me just choose myself here. I have to be assigned to any role that I want to participate in. So again, setting up some assignments, but ultimately these can work really, really great for you. So now Dan, if he logs in, he's going to see chapter 61. And he's only going to see the attachments in chapter 61. I would encourage you to maybe generate a faux user, practice with this, log in as this faux user, make some very specific assignments, see what they see and see what they don't see. So for instance, I want Dan to help me with chapter 61 traffic, but I don't want Dan to see other sensitive things like performance evaluation, discipline, internal affairs, those types of attachments. He won't see any of those. He'll only see chapter 61 and specifically the attachments in chapter 61. You could drill this down. If I wanted to break this down and I wanted Dan to only see the attachments and work within the section of 61.1, I could do that right there. Or maybe there's some specific standards in here that have some training requirements, or maybe I just want Dan to work on 61.1.4. If I were to add the assignment at this level, then 61.1.4 would be the only standard that Dan's assigned to. He would only see the attachments in that specific standard. So you can be very, very granular, or you can be a little bit wider. I'm going to navigate on my table of contents and go back up to the title of this assessment. If I make the assignment right here and assign Dan here, even with accreditation team responsibilities to participate, then Dan sees all of the standards. He only sees the attachments that I give him permission to in the accreditation manager role if I give him observe responsibility. But again, if I make the assignment up here, he sees everything underneath this. If I make the assignment at just chapter 61, he sees everything only under chapter 61. So a lot of different assignments can be made. You choose how you want to manage this, but I would recommend keep it simple to start with. If you're the accreditation manager and it's just you touching this, you want to get your head wrapped around it before you start to let other people have access to it, then just start at the top here with this one assignment. So the root of the menu here, one assignment to me as the accreditation manager to participate. I'm the only one in here until I add some additional assignments. Again, keep it simple as much as you can. If you have questions, reach out to Power DMS. They're always helpful, and also make some reference to the help menu, success community. You may have access to Power DMS University and those best practices for continued compliance, for naming, conventions, recommendations, things like that. Thank you.